How do I feel about forgiveness? I think forgiveness is, we don't forgive as a means to protect ourselves and gain some control. So by keeping that bad feeling, it reminds us of something negative that somebody did so that we will be sure that we don't go back to that person. I think it tries to give us some control. Well, that does give us some control because we're controlling our happiness by keeping someone out. I think where it goes sideways is that it keeps us focused on the problem instead of the solution. So maybe someone did something to us and we sit, if we're thinking about them and are angry, if we're going to be angry about them, then we have to think about them and carry that on. And then you're not focusing on the solution. In sports, you want to keep your eye on the ball or keep your eye on where you want to send the ball. When you're riding a motorcycle, you want to keep your eye on where you want to go. So if you're skidding, or with a car, if you're skidding toward a tree, you don't want to look at the tree. You want to look at the spot you want to go. So when you're not forgiving, I think you're holding on to it. And with the hopes to solve it because that's where you think your answer lies. Even if you're going to punish a person, you would be punishing them so that they would behave differently toward you because you still see them as the answer to the problem. But if they're not, you don't need to engage them at all. And that's where I think, letting go is so powerfully, and how we keep, by not forgiving, we keep these people in our lives, and it's that we keep them so that we can wrestle with them and beat them when the solution is somewhere else. I think you can move on. What do I think about, how does forgiveness fit into that? I think forgiveness is when you don't care anymore. It happened, you've dealt with it emotionally, and if you have actually dealt with it, then it won't matter anymore. I can guarantee you that there are times when someone did something to you as a kid, right? You're 7, your friend is 7. I don't know, maybe you're 12 and you're a girl and some other girl steals your makeup and you get mad at her. And then you move on, and there's probably things that or if you're a boy, someone stole something from you, and at the time you were angry, but today, sitting here, you don't even remember what it was. It's not an issue, you've forgotten it. It becomes irrelevant. And I think that's probably the best, because I think any type of struggling with this person, you have not forgiven. And so when it comes to forgiving yourself, I think acceptance is a huge part of that. Even if they're a piece of shit, you accept, okay, this person is a piece of shit. I understand that. They have a right to be a piece of shit. And then you can choose whether or not to engage with them. We don't want to, of course, look at ourselves as a piece of shit, but if we can, it's fair to look at ourselves, worst case scenario, as a work in progress, someone who has some challenges, some struggles. And I think seeing that clearly, which can be difficult on its own, is a huge step towards that, because all of us lie to ourselves. Because it feels better than looking at the truth. I would say none of us have an accurate image of who we actually are, for better or worse. I think many of us are far more capable in many areas than we realize. I think some of us have an inflated sense of what we're capable of because we've latched onto it for some reason. I've done it many times. And then I try it and I get some reality data. You're not as good as that as you think. And sometimes that's, uncomfortable. But I think getting in reality and seeing who we clearly all are is a huge step. And you don't have to accept it. but once you see it, I think it automatically puts you on the path toward acceptance. Maybe you have to go through some emotional process or pain, realizing I'm not that good at fill in the blank. But once you have had that, you go through that process, then you can accept, okay, this is actually where I'm at. And then decide how you want to deal with that. For me, it happened myself. I was working on a project where I was trying to, I've done a decent amount of work online, and I was taking on a new project and a new skill that is very important to doing online stuff. And turned out I wasn't very good at it, and I thought I would be great. I thought if I just put the time into it, I'll get it. I worked for 2 different companies, was let go by both of them because I wasn't able to deliver, and I had to come to terms with that. Now that doesn't mean it'll always be that way. If I wanted to get to, I might just have to spend more time than other people. But the point is I had to get into reality with where I was at the time. And after that, I decided maybe I'll revisit it in the future, but for the moment, I'm not going to continue down that path. And that was, at the time, I didn't struggle that much with it, but I did have to stop and go, okay, this is harder than you thought it was. You can't just waltz in here and figure it out and be off to the races. It takes a little bit more work. For whatever reason, some people are natural at things. I happen to be natural at other things that I'm very good at. And it's a part of self-awareness, realizing where we're at, and which is beautiful. That's beautiful. None of us can be good at everything. No human being ever has, ever will. But understanding that and then accepting that, we can even get to the point where we're laughing at it, So funny, I'm terrible at that. But I'm really good at this other thing. And accepting that, I think, can ultimately lead to inner peace, because we're no longer struggling with who we want to be. So I think that's where it ultimately all leads to, is self-acceptance, inner peace. And if it's self-acceptance, then that means you also accept the past decisions that you made that maybe you're not super thrilled about. You've realized, you see it, and you go, okay, that was where I was at the time. I did that. But I think ultimately we're worried about being okay. And if we can accept that and accept this is where I'm at and I'm okay now, all those other things, instead of becoming events that we get hung up on, they become just a part of our story and a part of our journey that we had to go through to get to where we are today. Because we had to learn those lessons, because if we didn't learn those lessons, we wouldn't have had to go through it. Life is kind of the ultimate teacher, and people get punched in the face and knocked down until they get the lesson. Once they get it, they no longer get knocked down. They got the lesson. But the lessons tend to get harder and harder and harder until you get it. I don't think there's any escaping it. But then we can see it for what it is, and which I think ultimately is having an accurate idea of the world, how it works, and us, how we work, and how we fit into it, with the goal of ultimately being peaceful and happy, regardless of where we're at. Anyway, those are some of my thoughts on forgiveness.